And, of course, my regular guest with Tech Talk is Mathew Dickerson. Mathew is a technologist, futurist, speaker, author, poet, and what can't you do, Mathew?
That sounds impressive when you put it that way, Wayne. Gee, thanks.
You are truly a Renaissance man. Were you good at footy?
No. I did my best footy on the couch watching the game, I think.
Good with the remote.
That's right.
Like most people.
Indeed.
Matt, technology and cars technology, how effective is the latest technology in reducing our road tolls?
Well, the latest technology is very effective, but there's an interesting study that's just come out that said that if some of the features that are mainly seen on luxury cars were actually on the standard everyday car, in fact, if they were compulsory, the estimation is, and it was a US study, that 20,500 US lives would be saved just by having that technology that's available in some cars on all cars. And if you look at some of the main ones, they talk about automatic emergency braking. And I've sat in my car when it's actually done that. And it's actually a little bit unnerving when you actually have it happen, when you feel the car is taking over and putting the brakes on for you, and you realise that you're a bit too close to the car in front, and wow, lucky it did, otherwise I might have been sitting in the car in front's back seat. So automatic emergency braking is one that certainly they've said can make a big difference. Blind spot detectors as well, so people moving lanes and catching a car next to them as they move lanes is another one that's very effective. And then they go on to some of the ones that you don't see so much, things like breath testing. So when you jump in the car, you start to drive off and you've got to be breath tested before you drive off. I still can't believe it happens, Wayne, but people still do get in the car and actually drive when they're drunk. And I thought there was enough education, I've been around long enough that would stop, but apparently it still happens. So if you could just stop people from doing it by forcing them to actually do some sort of breath test before they drove, that would save a lot of lives as well. So you've got some of these technologies, you've got other ones as well that are, I suppose, a little bit more obscure when you get to lane control. Some cars have got that, not a lot of people take a lot of notice of that sort of thing. And even pedestrian detection. There's about 800 deaths a year in the US that could be saved by pedestrian detection. So there's some little things like that. And again, I've driven cars with a lot of these features. They do make it safer. Sometimes you get a bit of complacency though as well. You start to think, well, the car's got that under control. I don't need to worry about paying so much attention to whatever it is you might be doing. So I think, again, the studies do take into account that. So a lot of lives could be saved just by using technology.
You're listening to Tech Talk on Epic Mornings with Matt Dickerson. Well, perhaps some of the pedestrians, Matt, should have some more technology. And I know there's some built into the phones to see if they're going to get hit by a bus, because people do, don't they?
Well, I think maybe there might be an argument there, Wayne, to have some pedestrians with less technology. Maybe if they didn't have their headphones in and listening to music, then maybe they'd be paying a little bit more attention as they stepped out onto the road from the footpath. But look, again, I think there is some technology there, but it's incredible the amount of technology we do have in our vehicles, but not all vehicles, unfortunately.
No. So let's move on to a huge topic at the moment, and that is Facebook. All these companies, big companies, boycotting Facebook. How does that happen?
Yeah, it's pretty big. When you've got companies like Coca-Cola is the latest one that's joined the Facebook boycott. You've got car company Honda has joined in there. Hershey, which is not big in Australia obviously, but very big in the US with chocolates. So you've got some of those companies of that size who have boycotted, and they've all said they're going to go on a global boycott for 30 days. Now, for some of those companies, it's probably a big impact overall from Facebook's revenue, but probably won't affect those companies a lot. But what it's all driven from is the Stop Hate for Profit campaign. So there's a big campaign now where there's a lot of things that feature on Facebook and on a lot of social media platforms that are stirring up either racial violence or just violence in general. And they're really trying to say enough is enough. Some of these platforms need to stop this. And the comparison that I often make is the likes of Facebook and Twitter are used so much now as sources of news. And in the old days, when we had newspapers as their main source of news, or the radio, or the TV, there were pretty strict journalistic standards, and you wouldn't see splashed across the front page of the paper or on your news bulletin, for example, Wayne, some of the things that we see on Facebook every day. So I think that's the focus where a lot of these companies are coming from, the Stop the Hate campaign is coming from, to say you've just got to be a little bit more sensible about the things that you publish. What impact will it have? Yes, it's a hit to the bottom line. 8% of the share value of Facebook has already dropped after these latest rounds of announcements. So that translates into a fair few dollars for some of the shareholders in Facebook. But the big picture, the long term, I think is a pretty interesting part of that as well. But it's certainly making an impact, and it's certainly being heard by the likes of Facebook and other social media platforms.
I've had politicians and other people suggest, Matt, that Facebook should be seen as a publisher, and therefore, as you mentioned, be under those strict guidelines, or have to submit to those. What are your thoughts?
I agree entirely. They are publishing out there, and the number of times I've talked to people that have had some interesting idea, if you want to call it that, about whatever might be in the news, and I'm not quite agreeing with where they're coming from, and I'm interested to explore more and find out more, and then I'll ask them where they heard about this or where they read it, and of course I say, oh yeah, I got it on Facebook, and immediately in my mind it's just devalued whatever argument they're putting forward by the fact that they read it on Facebook, because there are no standards. Anyone can put any crazy idea there and say, look, I read it on Facebook, it must be factual. So I agree that they are a publisher and they need to be held to some form of standard, and unfortunately the governments of the world, and government in the US in particular, has not held, say, Facebook, for example, to any sort of standard. So now it's actually coming from the other direction. It's coming from the public. It's coming from the Stop the Hate campaign organisers. It's coming from the companies that advertise. And if you don't have those advertisers with a company like Facebook, then Facebook doesn't exist. So they're listening to the advertisers more than they're listening to government. And again, the government has been pretty silent on it.
You're listening to Tech Talk with Matt Dickerson. Matt, there has to be a certain amount of personal responsibility, and in fact a lot of personal responsibility when posting anything onto Facebook or doing a tweet or using any other various means of communication.
Well, you're right. Unfortunately, I remember speaking to a solicitor many years ago, and he said one of the first rules that he applies whenever someone says, can I take action against someone, is the ability to pay. So when someone sitting at home posts some whatever rant or whatever they might post on Facebook that is highly offensive, or someone might want to sue them, if they find out that they've got $10 in their back pocket and that's the extent of their net wealth, then they don't worry about going after that particular person. When it's Facebook, then they've got a few more dollars, so they can probably start to take some action. So what ends up happening is individuals aren't often sued in an example like that. They go for the publisher of that information who has got the money to pay.
Interesting times. So do you think Facebook will die out?
Hey, that'd be a big call, wouldn't it? It's obviously a very large company, and they've come up out of nowhere in a very short period of time. To think that they would die away quickly because someone started a campaign is hard to imagine, but there have been examples in history where boycotts have been really effective. So will this boycott destroy or kill off Facebook? I don't think it'll go that far. It's certainly affecting their profits, and certainly will have an impact, already has had an impact on their share price, and will have an impact on their share price going forward. But the advertisers on Facebook, although you've got some high profile ones like the ones we've mentioned, and Starbucks and Unilever and some of these big companies, they only make a small impact on their bottom line, because there's a small number of those that spend a lot of dollars. But there's a much larger revenue stream for Facebook from lots of little advertisers spending $20, $40, $60, because you've got 1.3 billion users across the platform, and you've got these various organisations across the world all spending little bits and pieces. They all haven't committed to any sort of boycott, and at the moment it'd be very hard for some of those businesses, because some are just trying to get back on their feet after COVID-19, and if you tell them to take away their advertising because they want to boycott and send a message, it might actually send some of those companies out of business. Coca-Cola sure can handle not advertising for a month, but can the little mum and dad business handle not advertising for a month? And that's a big call. So I don't think it'll kill them. But look, Mark Zuckerberg as an example, he's $10 billion poorer compared to what he was last week. Now, I know that sounds a bit irrelevant when you can take $10 billion off someone's net wealth and they don't really notice it, but surely at some point, Facebook, their shareholders maybe Mark Zuckerberg, has got to take some notice of this and make some changes. I don't think it'll destroy Facebook, but I'm pretty sure it'll push some change for Facebook.
Matt, I'm trying to remember what Facebook really replaced. There was another means of social communications, and again, you're the expert, I'm not. Can you remember that? Well,
I'd say that social media is its own platform. When you've got things like Twitter and Facebook and even YouTube to a certain extent, you've got those things that really created a whole industry. I think the only thing that you might say that Facebook replaced is the web in general advertising. So people would put their
Yeah.
own web page up, they put information there, and essentially Facebook came along and made that more targeted and made it easier for people. It was a bit of hard work to create a website many years ago, but Facebook, you could just have it set up in a few minutes and start posting photos and posting whatever your opinion was about something. So I think they did all create this whole industry, that social media platforms, they created an industry of their own.
I've heard in the past that, fairly recent past, that a lot of young people don't like using Facebook, and they're trying to boycott it, or they want to create their own. Have you heard anything like that, Matt, as a technologist?
Well, sometimes, Wayne, when I do use Facebook and talk to Facebook and different organisations about it, I get accused of being a boomer, which of course is a very unpleasant tag for someone that's getting a bit old and a bit past it. And I think the first people who call me that are usually my children. So when I start talking about Facebook, then they've moved on to something else, whether it be Snapchat, whether it be Instagram. There's always something else coming along, nipping at the heels of the big guys and trying to take them on. And sometimes organisations are trying to appeal to what's new and the youth of society, but the fact that they're already established sometimes turns people off by the very nature of the fact that they are established. So Facebook, when it was new and when parents weren't on Facebook, kids loved it. But now all of a sudden, when you've got kids that are posting things and their grandparents start commenting on it, they think, well, this isn't the platform for me. If my grandparents are on it, I'm on the wrong platform. So that's when they moved to some of those other ones I mentioned.
Yeah, it's like sort of finding you in the shower or something while you're showering, grandma coming in or something.
You're talking about personal experience here, are you, Wayne? Is this something you want to share?
It did happen when I was a teenager, yeah. And my brother accidentally, he thought he was kissing his girlfriend in a dark room for a surprise, and he was kissing my grandmother very passionately. That can happen anyway.
I think we need to explore more of this, Wayne. It sounds very interesting.
Yeah, no, he won't like it. He won't like the fact that I'm talking about it. Hey, Matt, always a pleasure talking with you. And, of course, our technology tech talk is really interesting. And thanks again, and thanks for those wonderful topics. And I guess, Facebook, the big monster, will be with us for a long while. I
think it will be, but we'll talk about it next week again. And if things change there, we'll certainly be chatting about it, and your listeners will be hearing about it here first. But, I think they'll be around for a while yet, but I think this will start to change a few things.
Good on you, Matt. Thanks again, and we'll chat next week.
Thanks, Wayne.
Matt Dickerson and Tech Talk, and you're listening to Outback Mornings.